here for High Thrive Live here on our Thriving Thursday. And as always, I'm Heather Choate, international mindset expert with the amazing, fabulous Mark Johnston, international marriage expert. How are you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing wonderful.
Awesome. I'm personally feeling a little bit of a burnout. I don't know if anyone else is either, but with school starting, everything going on, making sure that we take care of ourselves so that we're not drawing water from an empty well is my priority right now. And if you are feeling burnout in your own personal life, quick little mindset tip here, make sure that you are giving yourself what you need so that you can keep showing up and being the best for your children and your spouses and your families. So today we are talking about what to do if you have felt rejected by your spouse. Wow, that was loud.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's a little. You're coming across a little bit soft on my end, so I end up turning up the volume, and yep, there was that notification.
Well, my son took my earbuds to school and lost them. So until I get new earbuds, I'll have to speak loud. Alrighty. So at one point or another, probably all of us have felt a level of rejection from our spouse, right? Even if it's something small, like we have a great idea. Like, okay, so this is yesterday, and Ben and I have a great marriage, but I was really excited because I was going to put together this great date for us. And I was really, really excited about it. And he kind of shot it down and I felt a little bit deflated. But then when it came to the root issue, right? Mark and I are always talking about that in our restoration equation, is getting to the root issue of that. Found out he had a really challenging day at work and he's feeling a lot of burnout in his own life. And this kind of high energy adventure date that I was planning just wasn't resonating with him. But that's just a small example. So in our relationships and our marriages, we can have these different levels of feeling rejected, whether that's on a small thing, like what we feel like is a great date idea, to something much more significant, something much larger. You know, maybe you have a big dream or a big ambition, a big goal, and your spouse shuts it down. Or even that rejection of I'm not good enough and the pain of betrayal that your spouse has now, you know, maybe had an affair or is going outside the marriage for different needs being met, and the pain of that kind of rejection. So we have the whole spectrum there. Now, a healthy marriage, Mark, can handle small amounts of rejection, and we can take that in stride and we can have the perspective. But we want to talk about what to do when there has been some of those deeper rejections, some of those deeper hurts. So what is the most common thing that we see happen when someone is feeling like really rejected by their spouse?
Well, you know, it really depends on the person here. There's a lot of different reactions. I know you and I, Heather, we sometimes talk about when there are confrontations like this and there's kind of this fight or flight sort of reaction there. But and there are a lot of negative reactions to something like this. I know you mentioned like even healthy relationships can handle a little bit of this, and almost like as if there's something different about unhealthy relationships in this aspect. But I don't really think that there is. In both cases, where the hurt really comes in is really just in how you're framing that rejection. Well, I liked the story that you gave because it points this out very directly. You know, you had brought out this big, wonderful, high energy date, then rejected it, and you know, at first there's maybe a little bit of hurt feelings, but as soon as you realize, okay, Ben just had a long day, there's that reframe. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Right. Where
things start going wrong is when you're unable to really reframe this rejection. So I maybe I need to take that statement back. Maybe that there is a little bit of a difference, and the difference is in the ability to reframe what's really going on and, you know, be able to explain what's going on.
You're right. And I'm going to be really transparent here. Earlier in our early married days, I would have taken it wrong. I would have taken it internally and said, oh, there must be something wrong about me. And I would have taken it like, I'm not good enough. And I literally would have made a huge emotional deal about this level of rejection that I felt from him. But going through the journey that Ben and I have been on and learning how to handle these kind of things takes that element out of it. And like you said, this is a small example, but it can also, the principle can also be applied to the bigger hurts. Now, before we get into that, I do want to talk about like 3 quick things of what not to do. And these are the most common mistakes. So the first one we kind of touched on, which is internalizing it, framing it incorrectly. The reality was he had a rough day and he was burnt out and tired. And so this he wasn't feeling that kind of a date. Okay. But if I had taken that and been like, I'm not good enough, no matter how hard I try to make him happy, or I did all this work, doesn't he care? Like, doesn't he see that this is important to me? If I start going down that route instead of what the real root issue is, then that's when we start to create that further, the bigger gap. And then I say, you know what, I'm not even going to try anymore. I'm not even going to try to plan dates. You just do it. And I start to put that distance there, right? And that can create a bigger rift between us, and it can lead to further and further confrontations down the line, me not being willing to open up. And that leads to those trust and intimacy issues that we've been talking about the last week and a half. Then I don't feel open with him. So I start to shut myself off. Then he senses that. So he starts to pull away and shut himself off. And this can literally snowball into a bigger and bigger deal. And that happens in marriage. So when we feel like we've been rejected by our spouse, that hurts us often in an emotional way. And we are a little bit animalistic in nature, that when we sense that things aren't quite safe, or that there is pain, or that there is hurt, then we go into the fight or flight response. So here's what not to do, okay, is to allow that response to kind of take us over and not see the situation for what it is. And the first one is the fight would be to add fuel to the fire. Mark, have I talked about this before, right?
We talk about it all the time.
About adding fuel to the fire, what not to do.
So yeah, in a case like this, what Heather's talking about, fighting is, okay, if you took that and you were interpreting it as something negative, like Heather's saying, okay, there's something wrong with me, and you take that message right there and you fight against it. So you might go, if we were taking Heather's example, and if she took that message and went to Ben, like, do you not appreciate me? How, don't you love me? Really come at him and confronting him in a blaming, finger pointing, judgmental, confrontational sort of way. Exactly. Now, I'm not saying that you can't confront things. It's just, there's a way to do it, that's a whole other discussion.
Absolutely. And Ellie's got something to say about it too, apparently.
Yeah.
All right. So we don't want to add fuel to the fire, right? When we get angry, sometimes we want to fight it back. And that's not going to get us where we ideally want to be. Now, the next one we want to avoid is the flight. And this is retreating into ourselves. We don't feel safe. And so then we want to pull away. We want to create some distance. Now, this is hard because Mark and I, we make a lot of generalizations, right? And almost every rule can be broken or it doesn't apply in different situations. So we're trying to give you sound principles that you can use. Now, if you've been deeply hurt, there might need to be some retreat for healing purposes only. And Mark and I have done other live streams on what that looks like and how that's healing and how it works. So it doesn't always mean we need to separate. However, sometimes some space that leads to healing and leads to progress is a good thing. Okay. But what we're talking about here is that you start stonewalling yourself. You give them the silent treatment, anything like that, where you're trying to retreat away from them because of pain. And what you want to do instead, well, we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. So what we don't want to do is fight. We don't want to flight. And then the last one is we don't want to suppress our emotions. This is a little bit different. It's going a little bit into the flight mode, but suppressing is kind of like putting on a brave face, or just saying we'll get to this later, or I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And so you're avoiding suppressing pain, bitterness, anger, and you're just saying, okay, for whatever reason, I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to push it away. And what does that cause?
I would say that this is probably the number one thing that almost every couple that ends up finally working with us, this is the most common thing. Like they've they've taken all these little slights, all these little problems, and they keep sweeping it under the rug and ignoring it, saying, hey, it will work itself out eventually. But then it comes to a point where those keep adding up, and then you start remembering all those little things that haven't been addressed, and you start saying, nothing's changing, nothing's going well, let's just end it. And that's not necessary. You just need to start, you can't suppress things anymore. You actually have to start addressing them instead.
Right, and doing it in the right way. So Mark, we don't want to be fighting. We don't want to be adding fuel to the fire. We don't want to be flighting, is my word, but fleeting.
You speak good English here, right?
Yeah, we don't want to be suppressing. Then what is it that we do want to do?
Well, it's getting into that with, it's the opposite of suppressing. Absolutely. If you can't yourself reframe the situation, if you can't come to that positive conclusion, you absolutely should be addressing that. I do this with my wife all the time. We still have arguments. We still have bad days on occasion. I talk with Jen all the time about, okay, what is our real intentions here? And so I know that as soon as I'm starting to think, okay, my wife Jen is being mean or not understanding, and I'm starting to think, okay, she has some sort of negative motive here, I realize, okay, it's probably not the case. And honestly, when I talk with my clients, I would say 99% of the time, most people are not trying to cause any harm. And so a lot of this is about not sweeping it under the rug and addressing it in the correct manner. So I'll go to my wife, Jen, and I say, hey, look, I felt like this was going this way. Seemed like this is what was happening. I'm sure I'm interpreting things wrong. I'm even calling into question how I'm interpreting things. And then we talk about it, and she says, oh yeah, that's not what I was meaning at all. This is really what I meant. And we get through that reframe together.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's exactly what we need to do. On a mindset, emotional perspective, is that when we have that tinge of pain, that, ooh, that did not feel good. And it could be a smaller thing like what happened last night with me and Ben, or it could be a really big thing, is that you must have the processes in place to effectively process through your emotions. When you're in that state of pain, anger, fear, hurt, and you act from that place, how effective is that going to be? Right? We're going to act in one of those three: suppressing, fighting, or fleeting,
flighty, running away.
Flighting, yeah.
Lighting, yes.
And so
we'll make up that word. We'll say it's a word.
Right? And having that deep level of trust, connection, and intimacy that we want with our spouses. So you need to have that ability to process through your emotions and have practices in place, even methods. Like I have rules, and we teach this to our clients. So here's a little bit of a gem here for you guys. But if this happens, I immediately do this. So if I feel this, I immediately go to this. And you just rehearse those and let those become your new reality. And that's going to look different for every single person. And that's what we kind of guide people through. But it's having systems in place to properly handle our emotions, so that then we can get to a good place to have the conversation like Mark was talking about, so that you can go deeper and figure out, okay, what's really going on here? What did you really mean by that? And have that understanding, which is our first part of our restoration equation. Exactly. And so we're kind of tying all of this together back into our core principles, just looking at it a little bit different of a way, that when you've been rejected, how to apply the restoration equation. So first is process your emotions, get to a leveler place internally, so that you can respond and understand, think clearly, and behave as your best version of yourself. And then second is that understanding. Seek to understand your partner. That's exactly what Mark is talking about. And then getting to the root of the issues rather than sweeping them under the rug, finding out what was really going on there. And when you get to that level, then things aren't just building up over the years, and they aren't becoming this huge catastrophic thing. Now, Mark, oftentimes when we work with people, though, they've already gotten to that place of it's a catastrophic thing, right? And so we're kind of coming at this from a place of preventative, like and what we do in our relationships to maintain a good, healthy relationship. But what do we do now if things have gotten to the point where they've gotten so bad and there's been so much hurt and so much rejection? It's in this catastrophic place. Do these same principles apply?
I think they do. I think they need a slightly different focus. I know I get very deep into this with a lot of my clients. It then becomes about not just trying to understand your partner, but helping them to understand you. In other words, we get back to some of those intentions and making sure that your intentions are coming across clearly and consistently. Because once again, most of the time, especially in a marriage, no matter where it's at, people's intentions are good on some level. They're looking for something good, and very seldomly are they saying, I'm going to go about this right here because I really want to hurt my spouse, my husband or wife. I in the years that we've been doing that, I can't even think of a single incident where someone is actually saying, hey, look, I really want to make sure that my husband or my wife really hurts right here. And even if that is the case, there's reasons behind that, and there's a little bit deeper motivation where it really is about something that's needed, something positive. That's odd as that sounds.
Yeah. And so this is like the tip of the iceberg. And if you're wanting to know, how do I feel safe to be open and vulnerable with my spouse? How do I encourage them to be open and vulnerable with me? What are some of those key behaviors that I can do that will really help my spouse to open up? And if there has been past pain, or your spouse constantly negatively interprets what you do, and you want to be able to turn that around, then Mark and I have put together a brand new training. And if you would like more information about that, then just comment Thrive. Comment Thrive. I'm used to writing emails, so it's always like, click here. Here's my call to action. But it is about taking action. And if you want to know how to resolve some of these things so that you can have a deeper level of trust, you can repair and restore trust. And as you do that, your intimacy will deepen and your connection will deepen. Then go ahead and comment Thrive so that we'll send that over to you, and you can have all the tools and resources that you need to make this work for you guys. So very good. Here's a quick question, Mark. Are you good to take a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
One today because we got to run. But what if they don't want to talk about the relationship anymore? All right. So this goes to the spouse that's really closed off and doesn't want to even talk about the relationship anymore.
I do think this kind of depends on the situation, what the plan is of this other spouse, because the same sort of situation could apply, where the husband or the wife is saying, hey, I'm in the marriage, I just don't want to talk about the relationship anymore, or hey, I'm already at the door, ready to divorce, and I don't want to talk about the relationship anymore. But either way, what you have here is, almost the other end of that. Your spouse, your husband or your wife is in that flight mode. They're the one that's shutting down and trying to protect themselves in some way, shape, or form. This is, I would say, 100% of the time. If you can't have that communication, if they're not sharing things with you, it's because that they believe that conversation is going to be uncomfortable or damaging or hurtful in some way. Almost 100% of the time, they're trying to avoid that negativity, trying to have some peace in their life. And so the only way through that is they have to be sure that if they're going to open up, if they're going to talk about things, there's not going to be too much cost. And where that cost level is, what they can tolerate, is going to be different from situation to situation, person to person. But in effect, if you can bring that cost and risk down, the chance of having that conversation goes up. And this applies either very, very shallowly, or in like shallow conversations, like what are you looking at on your phone? Sometimes people don't want to share that. To very deep conversations like this, like not even wanting to talk about the relationship. In either case, it's all about how safe, how secure, how comfortable they feel that conversation is going to be.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned, we have actually 3 key behaviors that will help your spouse to open up, specifically in this kind of situation where they're pretty closed off. And this goes right back to our key formula to restoring your marriage, which is in our restoration equation. We just did that masterclass last night. And so I encourage you to go check out that. It is a 50-minute long training that goes in depth into exactly what to do and the order in which to do them, because you want to make sure you're solving problems in the right order in order for it to be effective. So awesome, Mark. Well, thank you very much and appreciate you guys. We have a couple of comments, so we're not going to be able to get there today, but we will get back to you. Feel free to reach out to Mark or I. You can personally message us. And if you would like that training, go ahead and drop the comment Thrive in the comments. All right. Well, thank you, Mark, and we'll see you next time.
See you.